A warm cup of tea can calm the heart. Have you had yours today? What if both your mother and your husband's mom tried to take your baby, alone, without asking? This isn't just mother-in-law drama. It's toxic family, emotional betrayal, and a quiet war no one talks about. You ever notice how some people look at a baby and completely forget the mother exists? They'll coo, they'll smile, they'll ask to hold the child, but they won't even look at the woman who gave birth. Not really. Not with intention. Not with respect. That's what today's story is about, being treated like a gatekeeper to your own child. Nothing more, nothing less. It started with little things, a comment here, a joke there, but over time it became clear. Both her mother and her mother-in-law were trying to have alone time with the baby, and somehow thought the mother didn't need to be part of that equation. Let's pause for a second. Why would anyone insist on being alone with someone else's child, especially when the child is just a baby? Now, the mother in this story has a complicated past with her own mum, one full of emotional neglect and manipulation. She described growing up feeling invisible, the bad kid, never quite good enough, always walking on eggshells. Sadly, many of us have experienced something similar with a toxic family dynamic. So when her mother called and casually said she'd like to stop by and take the stroller for a spin, her heart sank. That's not just a walk. That's a request to take her baby alone, without even seeing the mother, as if she could just leave the stroller out front like a package delivery. It sounds absurd because it is, but that's exactly how emotional entitlement often looks: subtle, strange, and violating. When she confronted her mom, the older woman quickly backtracked. Well, you guys could come too, but the damage was already done. The intent was clear: bypass the mother and claim time with the baby. And this is where things get tricky, because some people might say, oh, come on, she's just excited to be a grandma. But being a grandparent doesn't mean you get to override the parent, especially not when the parent is setting boundaries for emotional and physical safety. The ending that we need to expect in time, the parent and have a grandnade. It's not just about walks or baby time. It's about control. It's about unresolved trauma, trying to rewrite history through a grandchild, instead of healing what's broken. And this isn't just limited to moms. It happens with toxic mother-in-laws too. In-laws who forget that your child isn't a second chance for them to get parenting right. It's a whole human being with a whole mother, standing right there. This kind of dynamic fuels so many of the crazy mill stories, the Just Nomil podcast rants, the endless online debates about wife versus mother-in-law boundaries. But at its core, it's about a mother trying to protect her child and her peace. So let me ask you, have you ever felt bypassed? Like someone looks straight through you just to get to your child or grandchild? How did you respond? And more importantly, how should we respond when love turns into entitlement? Let me ask you something. When does helpful turn into controlling? When does a grandmother's excitement cross the line into emotional overreach? Because for the mother in today's story, it didn't stop with her own mom. Her mother-in-law too had her own silent strategy. Polite on the surface, sure, always smiling, always ready with a suggestion, a gift, a plan, but underneath that calm exterior was a pattern, a constant, quiet push against boundaries. She would hold on to the baby just a bit too tightly when it was time to hand her back. She'd buy first holiday outfits, without asking. She made parenting suggestions, then pushed harder when the advice wasn't taken. Now, some of you listening might think, that's just what grandmas do. But here's the catch. When someone makes major parenting decisions without consulting the actual parents, that's no longer sweet. That's overstepping. One moment that really stuck out. The mom had to deal with an emotional situation, so she let her partner take their baby to his parents' house for the day. During that visit, her mother-in-law tried to feed their baby rice cereal, something they hadn't introduced yet, and she never asked permission, not once. When the baby was fussy afterward, the mother-in-law texted, I guess grandma just doesn't cut it. Now think about that. It sounds harmless at first glance, but the mother in this story saw it for what it was, a moment of guilt-tripping, a moment that quietly said, see, I tried. I should have more control. It's moments like these that end up on toxic mother-in-law podcasts, the kind of stories that get shared under crazy mother-in-law stories or relationship drama podcast titles. But what's scary is, it doesn't always come with yelling or name-calling. Sometimes it comes with a smile, and it didn't stop there. Later on, during Father's Day weekend, the mother-in-law casually announced, not asked, that she'd soon be ready to drive again after cataract surgery and would be coming over to babysit. She had already planned solo outings to the library, the park, maybe even just strolls around the block. No invitation, no coordination, just assumption. The mum was stunned. Why would a 74-year-old woman with mobility issues who never joins them on walks suddenly want to go alone with the baby? Her instincts kicked in. It wasn't about helping anymore. It was about claiming access, about reliving motherhood, but without the responsibility or the consent. And here's the truth many women don't say out loud. You can be kind and still cross the line. You can mean well and still make someone feel erased. That's why these boundaries matter. So let me ask you, have you ever had to smile through someone else's control? Has someone ever hidden entitlement under the mask of family love? How do we honor our elders without surrendering our role as parents? Let's talk about it. And Cal, let me ask you something that might hit home. What does it feel like to be treated as a gatekeeper, not a mother, not as a whole person, but as a hurdle between your child and everyone else's entitlement? That's exactly what this woman felt. After the boundary-pushing mother-in-law and the emotionally manipulative mother, it wasn't just the events themselves that hurt. It was the message behind them, that she didn't matter, that her presence was optional, disposable. She described the ache of being the one everyone tries to bypass, of being seen only as an obstacle to what others want, time with her baby. Not time with her and the baby, not time as a family, just the baby, and silence toward the mother. It's a deeply familiar feeling for so many parents, especially moms, who find themselves caught between toxic family dynamics and relationship drama they didn't create, but now have to manage for the sake of their child. You might think, well, isn't that just family? But let's pause there. When two women, both grandmothers, make separate attempts to gain solo access to the baby without her, that's not just coincidence, that's a pattern, a very clear one, and it carries a quiet cruelty, because every time they try to cut her out, they're saying, "You don't matter here, only your child does." That's a dangerous message, not just for the mom, but for the child, down the line. Children pick up on these things, the unspoken tensions, the subtle exclusions. This isn't just a story about a narcissistic mother-in-law or a toxic parent. It's about emotional boundaries and the grief that comes when people you expected to love and support you choose instead to compete, manipulate, or erase you. She said it clearly. It felt so transactional, like they wanted access to my daughter but not to me. Now think about that line. How often do parents, especially mothers, feel like their humanity gets stripped away the moment a grandchild enters the picture? How often do they feel like they're just in the way? And let's be honest, when these justnomil podcast stories surface, it's not just about grandmas spoiling the baby. It's about unresolved trauma, emotional immaturity, and the invisible labor of breaking generational cycles. This mom is trying to do that, break the cycle. She's drawing lines, saying no, feeling the guilt, carrying the weight, alone. And yet, the irony? She's the only one acting like an actual adult. So here's the question for today's discussion. Why is it so easy for family to treat mothers as the enemy, not the ally? And what would it take to shift that? Let me know what you think. Your story might help someone else find their voice. Have you ever had to be the first in your family to say, "This stops with me," because that's exactly where she's standing, at the uncomfortable crossroads between tradition and transformation, between repeating what hurt her or risking rejection to protect her child? Let's be honest, breaking a toxic family cycle isn't some big dramatic showdown. It's quiet, lonely, and deeply exhausting. In her story, the mother, after dealing with both her own manipulative mother and a narcissistic mother-in-law, realized something painful but powerful. I have to be the one to hold the boundary. No one else will do it for me. And that's the heart of so many toxic family Reddit stories. Not the chaos, but the silence that comes when you finally say no. No to manipulation, no to emotional guilt trips, no to being erased as a parent. She said something that stuck with me. Why would I want them alone with my child when they've never made space for me? That's not bitterness, that's clarity. See, when you grow up in dysfunction, you're often conditioned to maintain peace at any cost. But when you become a parent, the cost becomes too high. You start realizing that keeping the peace often means losing yourself, and risking your child learning those same patterns. That's where the true emotional labor begins. This isn't just about one walk around the block or one birthday outfit. It's about rewriting an entire relationship dynamic while still showing up every day as a loving mom. That's heavy. And let's not forget, people on the outside rarely understand. They'll say things like, "But she's just excited to be a grandma," or "You're being too sensitive, it's family." But excitement doesn't excuse boundary violations. And family shouldn't be a pass for emotional damage. This mom isn't being dramatic, she's being protective. And maybe for the first time in her life, she's choosing herself and her daughter. And yet, choosing to break the cycle often feels like a punishment. You lose connection, you lose tradition, you carry the burden of explaining to others why you're making certain decisions. That's why so many of us listen to relationship drama podcasts or stories of others facing the same challenges. Because we're craving validation. We want to know we're not the only ones waking up in the middle of the night wondering if saying a boundary made us the villain. But here's the truth. You're not the villain for saying enough. You're the foundation your child will stand on. You're the pattern breaker. You're doing the work most people never had the courage to start. So let me ask you, what's one toxic pattern from your family that you've tried to break? And what did it cost you? Let's talk about it in the comments. Your story might give someone else the strength to keep going. Let me ask you this. Have you ever made a promise to yourself like, "I'll never let my kids go through what I went through"? That promise is exactly what guided her every move. She didn't go nuclear. She didn't start family drama on purpose. She simply followed through on one quiet, powerful commitment: protect her child from the cycle she had to survive. We often hear stories filled with revenge, rage, or full-on confrontations. And yes, those can be satisfying, especially when dealing with a toxic mother-in-law or a husband's mom who plays favorites and crosses every line. But this one? It's different. It's about choosing peace, not just the kind that keeps the room quiet, but the kind that keeps a child safe. And that's why it hit so deeply. She didn't want revenge. She wanted respect. She wanted a life free of toxic family patterns and emotional landmines. She wanted to stop explaining herself to people who never truly saw her. In her own words, she said, "I used to be scared of being called cold or rude. Now, I'm scared of passing down emotional confusion to my daughter." That is the most honest, beautiful truth I've heard in a while, because it's not about being rude. It's about being clear. Clear about what kind of environment you're willing to allow. Clear about who gets access to your family. Clear about who your child will look to for love, guidance, and safety. And guess what? That clarity doesn't require yelling. It doesn't require drama. It just requires you to stop shrinking for other people's comfort. This episode wasn't just a story time. It was a reminder that you're not alone if you've had to cut ties, set boundaries, or disappoint people who thought they had lifetime access to you. Many of us come from narcissistic mother-in-law stories, or justnomil situations where someone always had to be the center, no matter who they hurt. But you get to write a different ending, even if it starts with something as simple as, "No, she's not babysitting." "No, I'm not explaining again." "No, that relationship is not safe." So, before we close today, let's keep this conversation going. Drop a cooch in the comments if you've ever had to build a wall to protect your peace. Type, "not the villain," if you've ever been made to feel guilty for setting a boundary. And if you've ever thought, "I wish someone told me it was okay to walk away," just write, "Me too." That's it. No overthinking, no long answers. Let's flood the comments with support, strength, and the truth that choosing yourself is not selfish, it's survival. I'm sending love to every one of you building a new legacy, one decision at a time. Until next time, stay grounded, stay kind, and never apologize for protecting your peace.